Star Wars Vintage Collection Haslab is nearing its end at $500. This one is a tough pill to swallow, but I got some thoughts on it. On top of that, the campaign itself is driving up the price of some older and formerly worthless 3.75-inch figures, and with that I have some wise and sage-like advice on how the savvy collector can navigate this new market. So let's talk about how Hasbro is cashing in on the Cantina. What is going on, everybody? My name is Matt, often called Big Nerdy. Together we are the the Nerd World Order, and this is Nerdzoic. So in case you haven't heard, the 2024 Star Wars Haslab is a vintage collection cantina. The playset is insanely detailed, and it's got all these incredible little, well, details with modular pieces to make it your own, which DDP Yoga joke right here, make it your own, bro. It comes with 2 exclusive figures, a new Warher the Bartender, whose name I could never say, so I know that's wrong, as well as the Tonica sisters, much to the delight of Victoria's Cantina. Seriously, she has to feel like Thanos at the end of Infinity War after he snapped the fingers and, like, accomplished his goal. She's been trying to get these figures made for the longest time. So congratulations, Victoria. The standard price on this is $400, but for $100 extra, you can get the expansion with a wall, booths, and furniture. The campaign is going to run for a total of 30 days and needs 8,000 to vote. The shipping estimate is, of course, a year and a half from now in fall of 2025. There are stretch goals, of course. They are Greedo at 11K. Here we go with the names again. Nabrun Leeds at 14K, and at 17K, some dude who looks like a wolf named Arieli, I think. I don't know. All right, so let's talk about this thing and my thoughts. And let's start first with what I thought when this leaked. So if you didn't know, this leaked like 3 weeks before the official announcement. There was a picture out there. I think they put the Cantina up on Hasbro Pulse by accident for like 5 minutes, and that's all it takes. My initial thought was, how the hell did this happen again? We did this with the Rancor, so we gotta tighten down security over at Hasbro apparently. These leaks are out of hand. Why are you looking at me funny? No, but seriously, the leaks did not help it because people had prejudged it before getting to see the whole campaign with not just the steak, but the sizzle too. My second thought was, there's no way this is $500. This is gonna be $300 tops. The reason I said that is because I immediately thought of like a 3D printer. Like, how in the world of 3D printers can you justify that now, kind of cost now for something like this? There's no articulation or tooling, so there's no way it's gonna be $500, right? Well, then came the live stream, and yeah, it was $500 for the whole shebang. After watching it, I thought, wow, fantastic job. Like, despite my negative feelings going into this because of the leak, they sold me like immediately. Day one sold. I still feel crappy about the price though, like more on that in a minute, but the launch video alone with like the 3D rendered virtual tour we got to go on had me wanting to immediately pull out like any playset possible to play with it. Like, it got me so nerding out, it was kind of sad, but I was like totally into it. Like, this is amazing. I also realized really quickly that this is not something that you can just spit out of a 3D printer. So first of all, you got to be really good to be able to print something this detailed. Then, who's going to design it? This thing has so many tiny little touches, whether it's wall decor or drink machines. Like, this is a hard piece to design if you wanted to do it on your own. And that's not even talking about like the value of your time. Like, even if you value your time at minimum wage, you're not going to make the money back on this, even at $500. And I still think it's priced too high. Just to be clear, I don't want anyone saying like, oh, you're justifying the price. I'm not justifying it. It sucks. The stretch goals are pretty much what you expected them to be, or something similar. More on that in a minute. But the other thought I had was, would this struggle to fund because of the footprint of it? Like, this thing's huge. Not many people have that much real estate available to display something. Like, this is one of the problems that Super 7 had with the big Thundercats lair. As great of a value as that was for the price, nobody had a spare room to put it in. Hasbro answered that one with a follow-up video, though, that showed multiple ways to display this thing, including being able to display it across 2 standard bookshelves, which was like, it looked fantastic and they were able to do it. And now I'm like, oh wow, really, almost anybody can fit this in their collection. So there's that problem solved. When I first heard there was going to be 2 prices for this thing and then it was confirmed in the live stream, I thought it was a stupid way to convolute things. Like, what are we doing here? But then the more I thought about it, I figured out it's actually quite genius, because there's going to be people who will be like, I can
can do 400, but I can't justify 500.
So for them, they can just buy the thing without having to get these extra parts, and honestly, the extra parts are things that you could probably upgrade to later through customs, 3D printing, or even just trying to piece it together yourself a little bit at a time. All right, now let's talk more about these tiers, because the tiers seem to be, for a lot of people, what make or break a campaign. As I already said, getting a bunch of hearted TVC Cantina figures is exactly what you expected it would be. I never thought we'd actually get the Tanaka sisters, so getting them in the main package is great. I'm really glad they didn't make that a stretch goal, because that would really anger people if it didn't get unlocked. On the tiers, I like what they are, but I absolutely hate the order that they put them in. Let me explain why. So first of all, if you don't know, banthaskull.com, fantastic Star Wars toy website resource. Like, I go there all the time. I love that place. But anyway, they have a Cantina scene guide, which I'll link in the description below. And the scene guide basically tells you every single shot from the movie, frame by frame, who was in it, whether we got a figure, whether that figure is a definitive figure or just, you know, it's an okay figure or it needs to be retooled. It tells you everything. Tells you where to get them. It has links to them on eBay. Seriously, check it out. One of the other things on that page is they made a priority guide of characters that have never gotten the figure and how important it is to get them. Now, the 10 out of 10 really need to get it. The most important characters, according to Bantha Skull, was the Tanaka sisters. So they got that done. But right behind that is that 𝐅𝐨𝐥𝐿 Wolfman looking dude. So if he's that important and we've never got him, and they're saying we are never going to get the things that we see as stretch goals in the main line, does that mean if we don't sell 17,000 of these things, we're never going to be able to ever complete the Cantina? Is that what that means? No 𝐅𝐨𝐿𝐥𝐿, sorry, I can't say his name. That seems really stupid to me. I feel like you should have used a figure that just needed a new sculpt or a new upgrade. That should have been your super stretch goal, not something we've never gotten before. I thought that was a really bad idea. The second stretch goal was Nabrun Leeds, as I'm going to pronounce his name. He came out in the Saga collection way back when, and again, according to Bantha Skull's like definitive guide, he needs some resculpting, so he's not a great super figure of that Saga collection version. So it makes sense that we're gonna get a new one of them. And if we miss out though, not a huge deal. We can grab the not as good one for about 30 bucks. I mean, he was 20 in January, so you could probably get him less than 30. Greedo makes sense as the first stretch goal to me. We have previous versions of him that are okay, but he really needs a modern figure considering his role and his importance in this scene. So overall, I'd say that the stretch goals made sense and were good picks, but probably not the right order. Let's talk overall thoughts here. I've been feeling very down on the future and current path of Star Wars toys for the last couple of years now. It's just been very stale. It's almost been formulaic in the way Hasbro's like, new show, new Mando. Mando that's 3.75, Mando that's 6 inches. And there's just doesn't seem to be that much creativity or imagination. I look at the other teams on Hasbro and what they're coming out with. I look at Marvel Legends, I look at G.I. Joe Classified. The teams are diving into the source material and really getting us some cool deep cuts, I guess you could say. And Star Wars is harder, I get that, because of the lack of new source material. And really, you know, you look at Marvel, 10,000-ish characters, Star Wars, not 10,000 characters. Much harder to do. Yeah, I've been feeling pretty bad about the whole Star Wars Hasbro line in general. But I gotta say, while this campaign probably predates his arrival to the team, you can feel Mr. Stevie's fingerprints all over this whole campaign. Like, the guy came in and he brought the sizzle to the steak. And if you remember, this was originally supposed to be announced on May 4th, and he had it pushed back because he said they weren't ready to announce it yet. At the time, I'm like, how are you not ready to announce it? It's not like you even have, like, prototypes. Like, what do you mean? But now it makes sense. He knew, hey, I got the steak, but there ain't no sizzle. So he put it off a month to get the sizzle ready. And how many times can I say sizzle in a video? It seems like quite a bit. So if I take nothing else from this campaign, it's that having him back involved with the Star Wars marketing team and brand team is huge, and a very good sign for the future of Star Wars toys. My second thought, and this is not a surprise because I've already mentioned it, the price still feels too high despite it being an amazing product. This is not an articulated figure, which means that it needs less engineering. And although I do see a ton of sculpting, it doesn't seem like it should cost as much to create all the tooling for. I am no expert in this by any means. This is something that, like the production end, I'll leave this to Bobby Vallow to talk about. Like, he can talk about it like he broke down the engine, the Vengeance, so I'm expecting you to do that now, Bobby. Will I buy them for the store? Most likely not. So I kind of view them as a high-ish risk for a low-ish reward. By that I mean I would have to buy at least 4 or 5 to make it worth my time, and if I had liquidity tied up in it, well then that's money I can't spend on other inventory, and it's just not worth it for 2 years. My advice to you, buy it if it fits in the budget and it fits in your collecting focus. Really spend some time thinking about it though, because if you don't back it and you decide later that you want to, you're gonna regret it a lot. I'll give you an example. I didn't back the Ghost. I justified that by saying I have nowhere to put it and I'm not super nostalgic towards Rebels. So what's the point? Well, here's the thing. Now that I'm seeing all the new pictures come out, I'm seeing like the production updates, I've got super FOMO or whatever you want to call it because I already missed out. I feel really crappy about it and I really wish I would have just backed one and paid it and then said, okay, well now that it's here, I don't think I need this. I could just sell it. My advice is if you have the liquidity to do it, buy it if you think you might want it. And then if you decide later, even before the campaign ends, that you don't, you can always just cancel it. And if you get it, you can sell it and you're guaranteed to at least make a couple dollars over what you paid for it. Probably much more than that. I'll also say this though, if you're on the fence of buying this, go back it like right now. Okay, in like 3 minutes. When this video's done, go back it, because the earlier this thing funds, it's like a weird mental reaction in collectors. Once it hits that funding goal, the FOMO sets in for people who are on the fence and not willing to back it right now. They'll be like, oh wow, this is definitely happening. And oh wow, now I want these stretch goals. And that's when they start going and the sales velocity is increased. So yeah, help get that sales velocity going. Go back it after this video. You can always go back and cancel it later, but at least get the backing in now so that we can start getting that number growing to see just how high we're gonna go on these tiers. I doubt we hit 17K. I think there's a good chance we can hit the 13 or 14, whatever it is for tier number 2. Secondary market impact is going to be weird on this one. If you plan to buy extras to flip, proceed with caution and keep an eye on what the total number of these made are. Galactus and the Razor Crest were made in big quantities, like 25,000 to 30,000, somewhere in there. They're only going for like 100 or 200 more than the original price now. If you go to a toy show, you'll see these at like every 5th booth. They're very abundant. But that said, the stretch goals on this are really going to be, they're going to be popular. Like you'll be able to sell each one of the carded figures for at least $100 a piece. That is going to be worth it. Worst case scenario, if you decide to sell it later, you can part it out. The fact that I'm not buying any of these for the toy store should tell you my thoughts on buying to resell in any sort of bulk. But if you want to buy a second to try to cover your costs later, I get it, you know, no risk it, no biscuit.
Please don't ever do that again.
I can't blame you. One thing that's really interesting with this to me is the impact it's had on the secondary market since the leak and then the official announcement. You see, since that time, the Cantina patrons, all of the old figures, they've been going like wild. People have been cashing in by putting them up for crazy prices, and they've been starting to go for pretty stupid prices now, considering before they weren't worth that much. I find this really interesting. In fact, I was going to make a whole video on this, but there just wasn't enough meat on the bone to do it. But since the beginning of the year, there are many figures that are very common, and there's a lot of them, and you could get them for like $5 to $10 at the beginning of the year, are now going for $30 to $50. Like, it's crazy. Some examples of this, and again, I'm using the Bantha Skull Definitive Version Guide. This is going to be a ton of pronunciation errors, but here we go. The Black Series 375 Mosip Benid went from 28 to 42. Vintage Collection Dr. Evazan's up 36% from $36 to $56. 30th Anniversary Mahim Onif doubled in price. I think it's the Saga Collection Hem Dazan 53% up. 𝐾𝐈𝐒𝐿𝐒𝐿𝐒𝐿𝐒𝐿𝐒 $14 to $43 in just a few months. And then the one that I think is the craziest is the Power of the Jedi Boschick. $10 at the beginning of the year. Now he's going for $35. Come on here. Like, you couldn't give Boschick away at one point. Now, these numbers I just gave and showed are based on closing auctions, but if you want to see something really funny, look at the current asking prices. They're like 2 to 3 times the numbers I just said. Like, you're going to see Boschick for like 40 or 50 bucks, I bet at least. Some of the other guys I saw listed for $100. Come on. Which brings me to my advice on filling out the Cantina. I'm seeing a lot of people say that they are turned off, that they're going to have to spend like an extra $400 to $500 just to buy the figures to fill out the Cantina. And people are using that as the reason to say, well, I can't buy this now, and it's Hasbro's fault. My advice, first of all, chill. The market will calm in time, and filling out the Cantina can be a marathon, not a sprint. Like, seriously, this thing does not have to be full of 30 figures from day one. You gotta have the main figures, and then over time, it doesn't have to be full on day one. I mean, you're already gonna start off with like a starter set. You got a bartender. you got two patrons that are also sisters. Grab yourself a R2-3PO Luke and Obi-Wan for that opening scene where they walk in. What do you know? These are the cheapest options. You can get them all for about retail. Get them so you have them on day one, and the rest you can just fill it up as you go. As I said, the Cantina patron prices are stupid right now, and listen, I'm like Vito Corleone in the first Godfather when he's talking to Sollozzo, like, I don't care how a man makes his money, it's no business to me as long as his business doesn't interfere with my business.
Never tell anybody outside the family what you're thinking again.
I don't care. You want to try to sell them like that? Knock yourself out. But my advice to you, NWO, do not pay the internet prices for this stuff. Forget it. For the time being, do not even try it. Unless you got a lot of cash to burn, that is. If you got cash to burn, I don't know how that feels, so knock yourself out. Instead, hit conventions and local stores. I guarantee that there's going to be some great deals to be found because many of the people running these stores, they have a huge inventory. They don't go around repricing figures every week, every month. They can't keep up with the trends. You're going to be able to find some of these older figures still for $10 at local stores or at conventions in the bins under the table for stuff that they haven't been able to get rid of for years. So yeah, I think you'll be able to get a lot of the Cantina figures for the pre-Cantina announcement or leak price. Another thing I keep hearing is, oh no, there's no Black Series Haslab again, we got left out. Listen, I get it, but sadly, I understand Hasbro's decision. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand it. Let's try to look at it just from their point of view from a high level. The Rancor Haslab failed. So now the team's probably like, all right, nobody wants beasts, so we can't do Haslab beasts. Next, they tried the lightsaber for Reva. Didn't work. So now they're like, all right, guys, can't do beasts, can't do roleplay items. So they're running out of ideas. And then someone's probably like, why don't we do vehicles? And then some other person on the team is like, we did vehicles. The TIE Fighter was clearance times 1,000,000 and the Snow Speeder didn't do very well either. So now, if you are the Star Wars team and you're Hasbro, this is what you're thinking. At least I'm thinking that's what they're thinking. I don't know if they're thinking that I'm thinking that that's what they're thinking, but that's what I think they're thinking. That was confusing. And while the reasons that each of these things did not succeed has nothing to do with the category they're in, I think that that is why they think that it didn't work. When in reality, I think me and a lot of other people could point at many, many flaws with each of those other items. Personally, I'd love to see them revisit the idea of doing some vehicles again, but their options are pretty limited. Like they could do an ATST or maybe even an X-Wing. I don't know. I actually made a video about this years ago and where I broke down like what I think the odds are of each Black Series vehicle happening as well as a projected cost. I made that video a long time ago. Like we were under 1,000 subs, so enjoy some vintage Big Nerdy. Yeah, anyway, check that out here. And remember, you gotta get old. You don't have to grow up. Just be cool and stay nerdy. Later.